I didn't think much about the basement that night, and that's the part that bothers me the most now. The casualness of it, the way I treated it like any other errand, like something small and forgettable. Because if I had felt even a fraction of what I would feel later, I would never have opened that door. I would have made an excuse, blamed the fuse box, blamed the wiring, blamed anything at all, but I didn't. I just pushed the door open and stepped into a darkness that felt as though it had been waiting for me long before I arrived. And the first thing I noticed was the air. Not cold in the ordinary sense, not the kind that makes your skin prickle or your breath fog, but still heavy, unmoving, as if it had settled over years without being disturbed, carrying a smell that reminded me of wet stone and rust and something faintly organic, something that didn't belong in a place that was supposed to be nothing more than storage. And the door closed behind me with a slow, dragging sound that seemed to echo too long, too deep, as if the space beyond the staircase absorbed it and held onto it instead of letting it fade. And I remember turning slightly at that, just a reflex, just a moment of hesitation, because something in me didn't want to go further, something instinctive and quiet. But I ignored it the way you ignore those small warnings, those whispers you can't quite justify. And I raised my phone, switched on the flashlight, and began to descend, each step carrying me deeper into a place that seemed to swallow the light instead of accepting it, the beam stretching out ahead of me, but never quite reaching the bottom. The edges of the staircase dissolving into shadow as if the darkness refused to be defined. And with every step, the silence grew thicker, not empty, not peaceful, but full in a way I couldn't explain, as if it was listening, as if it was aware of me. And halfway down, I stopped without meaning to, my body halting before my mind could understand why. And I stood there, staring into the dim space below, listening, trying to hear something, anything. A pipe, a drip, a hum, something normal, something that would make the place feel grounded. But there was nothing, only my own breathing, too loud, too uneven. And I realized then that the silence had changed. It wasn't absence anymore. It felt occupied, like stepping into a room where someone had just been standing, where their presence lingered in a way that couldn't be seen but couldn't be denied. And that was when the first real unease crept in, slow and quiet, wrapping around my chest, tightening just enough to make each breath feel deliberate. But I forced myself to move again, step by step, until I reached the bottom, and the basement opened up into a wider space than I expected. Low ceiling, concrete pillars, rows of metal shelves stacked with forgotten objects, shapes hidden beneath dusty sheets. Everything still, everything untouched. And my light moved across it slowly, cautiously, revealing fragments of a place that felt abandoned in a way that went beyond neglect, as if it had been left behind by something that had no intention of ever returning. And then I saw it, not all at once, but piece by piece, a shape at the far end of the room, standing between two shelves, vertical, unmoving. Something that didn't belong among the clutter and decay. And I took a step closer, raising the light slightly, and the beam fell across it fully, revealing stone, gray, and worn, carved into the shape of a figure, a woman or something like one. Its head bowed, its hands covering its face, long fingers pressed tightly where its eyes should have been, wings rising from its back, folded but heavy, their edges chipped and uneven. And for a moment I just stared at it, trying to understand how something like that could be there. Because I had been in that basement before, not often, but enough to know its layout, enough to know that something that large, that distinct, would not have gone unnoticed. And I remember saying it out loud without thinking, my voice sounding small and out of place in the thick silence, saying that it hadn't been there before. And the sound of my own words made the space feel even more wrong, as if I had broken some unspoken rule simply by speaking. And I tried to reason it out, tried to tell myself it must have been moved, must have been stored there recently, must have some explanation that made sense. But the longer I looked at it, the more that explanation slipped away, because it didn't look newly placed. It looked settled, as if it had been there far longer than it should have been. Dust settled into the lines of its form, faint cracks running along its arms, And yet there was something about it that didn't feel old, something that felt present, aware in a way I couldn't justify. And I turned away from it then, not out of fear, but out of discomfort, telling myself I had a job to do, that I just needed to find the fuse panel and get out. And I took a step, and the light flickered. Just once, a brief stutter, but it was enough, because something inside me reacted instantly, something sharp and immediate that pulled my gaze back toward where the statue stood. And when I looked at it again, it was closer, not dramatically, not in a way that could be measured or proven, but closer in a way that felt undeniable. And my chest tightened as that quiet unease turned into something heavier, something colder. And I remember whispering that it wasn't possible, even as I stared at it, even as I knew something had changed, and I began to step backward, slowly, carefully, my eyes fixed on it, refusing to look away. Because without understanding how I knew that looking away was the worst thing I could do. And with each step back, my awareness sharpened, my heartbeat growing louder, each pulse echoing in my ears. And the statue remained still, its hands still covering its face, its wings unmoving. But the distance between us had changed, and that change was enough to unravel everything I thought I understood. And I felt it then, fully, clearly, the rule forming in my mind, not as a thought, but as a certainty, that it moved when I didn't see it, that it needed that moment, that gap, that absence, and that if I gave it even the smallest opportunity, even the briefest lapse, it would take it. And so I didn't blink. I held my eyes open despite the burning sensation building behind them, despite the strain, despite the way my vision began to blur at the edges, because blinking felt like surrender. And I stepped back again and again, each movement slow, controlled, my breath shallow and measured, afraid that even the act of breathing might somehow disrupt my focus. And I told myself I just needed to reach the stairs, just needed to get out. But the stairs were behind me, somewhere in the darkness. Unseen, and reaching them meant moving without looking where I was going, meant risking a misstep, a stumble, something that would force me to look away, and the fear of that possibility settled deep in my chest, heavy and suffocating, and my eyes burned more intensely now. The need to blink becoming overwhelming, instinct fighting against will. And I whispered to myself not to do it, not to blink, not to give it that moment. And I took another step back, and my heel caught on something. A piece of debris, maybe a broken chair, and my balance shifted. My body reacting automatically, and my eyes closed. Not fully, not for long, just a fraction of a second. But it was enough. And when I opened them, it was there, right in front of me, so close that the light from my phone washed over every detail of its face. Its hands no longer covering its eyes, lowered now, revealing features carved deep and sharp, its mouth open in a silent scream, and its eyes hollow and dark, fixed on me in a way that felt impossibly alive. And the shock of it broke whatever control I had left. A scream tearing out of me as I threw myself sideways, the phone slipping from my hand and crashing to the floor, the light spinning wildly, casting broken, fragmented flashes across the basement, and then darkness, complete and immediate, swallowing everything. And in that darkness, the fear changed. It deepened because now I wasn't looking at it, and that meant it could be anywhere, moving freely, closing the distance without resistance. And for a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, the silence pressing in on me. And then the light returned as the phone settled, its beam angled across the floor, and I scrambled for it, grabbing it with shaking hands, sweeping the light across the room. But the statue was gone, no longer where it had been, no longer visible. And that absence was worse than seeing it, because it meant I had lost it, lost track of it. And the rule that had formed in my mind twisted into something more dangerous, because now I didn't know where to look, didn't know where it would come from, and panic threatened to take over. But I forced myself to think, forced myself to remember what I understood, that it needed darkness, needed absence, and that meant I needed light, constant, reliable light, more than what my phone could provide. and my gaze darted around the room until it landed on the fuse panel across the basement, and the realization came quickly that if I could restore power, if I could flood the space with light, I could remove its advantage, but reaching the panel meant moving through the space where it could be, meant running without watching every angle. And that thought sent a fresh wave of fear through me. But staying still wasn't an option, because standing there, waiting, would only give it time. And so I made the choice. Tightening my grip on the phone and moving forward quickly, the light bouncing with each step, shadows shifting, stretching, threatening to conceal movement I couldn't track. And I didn't look back, couldn't risk it, because if I saw it and then lost sight again, it would be even closer. And I reached the panel and slammed into it, fumbling with switches that felt unfamiliar, my hands clumsy with fear, flipping one, then another. Nothing happening. The light flickering again, my heart racing, and I turned despite myself, and it was there again, closer than ever. Its arm outstretched, fingers inches from my throat, its face twisted into that same silent scream. And in that moment, everything narrowed, everything focused into a single action, and I hit the final switch, and the basement exploded into light, every bulb flickering to life, every corner illuminated, no shadows left for it to hide in, and the statue froze mid-motion, its hands suspended in the air, its expression locked, and I collapsed against the wall, gasping, shaking, staring at it, making sure it wouldn't move again. And I stayed there for a long time, not blinking, not looking away, until I was certain the light held steady, until I could trust that it was truly frozen. And then slowly, carefully, I began to move back toward the stairs, one step at a time, my eyes never leaving it, until I reached the staircase, until I climbed, until I pushed the door open and let the light from above wash over me. And I didn't stop until I was out, until the door was closed, until I was away from that place. And they told me later that there was nothing there, no statue, no sign, no evidence, that it was stress, imagination, something explainable. But I know what I saw, I know what I felt, and even now, every time I close my eyes, every time I blink, I feel it again. That presence, that waiting, that certainty that somewhere, just beyond what I can see, it's still moving, still getting closer, one blink at a time.